This is how we made our cover of Come As You Are by Nirvana. So we recently dropped a cover version of the legendary song Come As You Are by Nirvana. We wanted to make this video to show you guys how we made it. There's gonna be a lot of reasons for that. If you are somebody that's a musician and you want to think about covering songs, this might be a good place of maybe inspiration, so you can think of some possible ways that you can add your own twist to some cover songs that you want to do. But even if you're not a musician and you're just interested in seeing how music and songs come together and how they're produced, you might find this really interesting. We're gonna go through each piece of the song and kind of explain the different elements that make up the total piece, and we're really excited to show you how it went down. So the first piece is going to be the intro. First things first, when you're talking about making a cover song, at least for us, we want it to be familiar, but not the exact same.
Exactly, yeah. Not the exact same.
Which I think is really half of the battle, right? So you're trying to figure out how to make this song that's super huge and famous, how to make it your own. So I think when we're thinking about this song, the main thing that at least I thought of is the opening riff. How are we gonna make this riff different, but still the same? So at first it's like, should we play this on guitar? Should we make this a keyboard? How should we do that? Definitely let's make it a different instrument. We can still play the same riff, but having it as a different instrument will give a different feel to it.
Yeah, it breathes a different life into the song. Even though it's the same song, you as the listener would get a fresher approach to the song. So it won't be like, oh, well, why do I have to listen to this if I already
know
the song?
Yeah. So there's two parts. Where the instrument should be, obviously we change this to a keyboard. And the second part is, do we want to play the riff exactly the same? Because I feel like you really have two options. You either do more with the riff or you do less. If the original riff is do 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 do, okay, do I want to do more? Do I want to do 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 like that?
Right.
Or do I want to bring it down? So we decided to bring it down and basically boil it down to the most simple version of the riff, which is going to sound a little something like this. So you can kind of tell that it's the riff, but it's obviously different.
The accents are there. Yeah, the main accents are there to make it noticeable.
Exactly. So something that I do want to mention that I thought was pretty cool. So what I did here was I made it shift between ears while the riff is playing. So if you listen, it starts in the left ear and then it shifts over to the right ear. Which I just think is a cool way to make like movement in the song, so it feels like there's things happening even when it's kind of the same riff.
I love that about production. I always used to wonder what makes a producer a good producer, and I've really been like listening to songs, and I've noticed that some producer, they'll pan to one ear to the other ear. When two singers are supposed to sing the same word on the same beat, he'll actually kind of make a tiny little echo. You'll have a producer do that. I'm like, oh, well, this is what makes producers the best. A good one, an award-winning one. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's that.
So there's a few more parts to the intro that we should get to. So obviously the riff was the first thing, and then you have to make the drums. You have to build things up from the bottom to the top. The drums and the bass are always going to be the foundation of the song. So the earlier you have the drums and the bass pretty much set, I feel like the easier it is to build up the rest of the song. So we started with the riff, and now I'm going to bring the drums in. So we started out with a 4 count, and then right into some drums basically just to highlight the beat that we already made. So that ended up kind of sounding like this. So that's basically just following the same rhythm as the riff just to keep it going. And then you want to add the bass, which for this song particularly was really fun because in the original song, the bass line is pretty much doing what the guitar is doing for a lot of it. So we're like, we want to do something different on the bass to add just another dimension on it. So the full intro ends up being something like this. You can hear just the long bass notes here.
Yeah.
And then different bass notes coming in here the second time. And then I want to shout out, I actually used 2 drum kits in the beginning of this. You'll be able to hear what the second is. So this is the first drum kit. And then I have another one coming up just for like 2 drum hits. This is a separate kit right here. That pop, boom, that's a whole separate drum kit because the one that I was using the first spot, I couldn't find the right sound. So sometimes you gotta add some extra drum kits, okay? So we're coming up to the end of the intro. The last thing that I added, I thought was just a really cool way to do something different again, but keep it kind of familiar, is the little bit of acoustic guitar in the right ear. So you'll hear it go through the riff once. And when the riff starts the second time, you're gonna hear this acoustic guitar in the right ear about here.
I like the acoustic because it adds to the build-up.
And then two other things just to make it, there's a lot more going on in this intro than I remember. So there's two extra things we talk about before going to the little vocal part that starts there. So just to make things a little, the build-up a little stronger, there's a keyboard in here called a riser. So I'll actually just solo that, which is kind of like the typical thing that you think of like dance music or something where there's gonna be a drop, a sound that just keeps going up. Kind of sounds something like this. So there's that, but in addition to that, I did something else. I took a crash cymbal and reversed it. So I'm gonna play just this one now, and it's literally just a cymbal hit, just in reverse. So when you piece them together, you get something a little like this. This little subtle thing that just really makes it a lot bigger, and it makes it a bigger payoff when you finally hit the drop in the first verse, which we will be at soon. There's one last thing in the intro, and that is the little bit of vocal magic that's going on here, the little swell here. So first of all, shout out to our boy Sean Hernandez, who helped us record the vocals for this. This was completely his idea. We did not think to do this.
What's up, Sean?
You'll see, so we actually recorded a few different, just like oohs. Siva and I both kind of ooh, just to kind of go in right as that buildup is happening, just to make everything seem even bigger and bigger. So that kind of sounds like this. I'll just play that part. Well, the cymbal was in there too. I forgot to mute it, but you hear what I'm saying, right? So then, when you finally get all of the pieces together, you get the full intro, which sounds a little bit like this. That's everything that goes into the intro. So next we're gonna break down the first verse. We were talking about this earlier, but whenever you're making a song, you want to start from the bottom up. Knowing that we already have an idea of what the bass and the drums were going to sound like from the intro, we kind of made the bass and the drums first for the verse so that we can build everything up on top of that. So this is basically what the drum beat is for the verse, and then I'll play it with the bass right after. So there's the build up, and then another thing I did here, I added another drum kit, because you just can't have enough drum kits, right? So that's the bass beat, and then I added a little cymbal just to keep it kind of moving, so you'll hear the difference here. Take it out, put it back in. So again, nothing crazy, but I think it just adds a little bit extra to the beat just to make it a little more interesting. Then you added the bass, and it sounds a little something like this. The bass basically is the same exact thing as what the riff was from the other one. The thing we used for the riff is just bells. That's just a synthesizer like bell sound. And the bass basically just doubled it just to give it that low end sound that we just heard. And with the riff in it, this is what it sounds like. That's almost it before we get to the vocals, which there's a lot to talk about here. The last thing is that I kept the acoustic guitar going through the verse, which basically is playing the riff again, but a little busier. So like I was saying, when you're talking about the riff, you have to decide, do you want to make it busier or do you want to slow it down a little bit and kind of boil it down? For the synth, we did the most basic version of it, but for the acoustic guitar, I actually went the opposite and did a busier version of it. So you'll hear a lot more notes in this. I'm just going to solo the acoustic guitar so you can hear it by itself, but it sounds something like this. Just a few extra notes. So when it finally all comes together, it sounds a little something like this. Oh, and this track right here is just an extra cymbal. Again, more drums, but just more for the party, you know? So this is the first verse with everything together.
Now we're gonna talk about the vocals.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, for the first part, right when I drop in at Ooh, Come, I did it like that because there is such a build up to something that's about to happen. So I kind of imagined everything about the original song I wanted to put into the delivery of the vocals. So I even thought about the album cover that's like a pool. I thought about when Kurt does his own remakes, covers of other songs, his approach to them as well. I know he always used to have this kind of a twangy, kind of like whiny kind of sound, and I wanted to incorporate that into my vocals as well. Because the beat was so different from the original one, it almost sounded like it was luring you into a huge doorway. I wanted the vocals to reflect that. That's why it started out with like, ooh, you kind of come, like you kind of splashed into the pool yourself.
We're gonna just isolate the vocals for this section where we're talking about the vocals, then we'll play it all together later. But this is basically what you're talking about right here. This.
Ooh, come as you are.
When we first had the idea for the song, we thought that the way that we would make it our own was that we were gonna switch off vocal lines. So like Sifa would do the first line in the left ear, then I would do the second line in the right ear, and then we would harmonize in the middle. So that's basically how the verses go. So I'm gonna give you a little peek of that.
Ooh, come as you are. As you were. As I want you to be.
The part where it really gets fun is the harmonies.
And with the harmonies, that was so fun because we were doing this live for a while before we recorded it. And I did have fun setting the harmonies together before we actually went out into the world.
It's funny because performing it live, you think you know exactly how it's gonna be, and then you go into the studio and it ends up being completely different sometimes. But that's part of the fun, you know? You're always trying to figure out the best way to do it, and just because you did something one way before doesn't mean it's always the best way to do it.
Right.
So that's what it's all about. So these, we did, Sifa and I each did a harmony track, so this is what those sound like right here.
As I want you to be.
So when it all comes together, the vocals end up sounding a bit like this.
Ooh, come as you are. As you were. As I want you to be.
And you can really hear how the extra vocal tracks really make it stand out.
Sounds like two more people in the room.
So after all of that, all the instrumental tracks, all the vocal tracks, it all comes together to sound a bit like this.
Ooh, come as you are. As you were. As I want you to be. As a friend. As a friend. As an old memory.
One thing I almost actually just forgot. So there's one other instrument that's added to the second part of the verse. This is really just to keep things moving so it's not really stagnant.
Yeah.
Hey, there you go. So there's always something changing. Me personally, as a producer, I don't like a song to go 4 bars without anything changing. There's always got to be some kind of movement to keep, I think, to keep listener interested. So at this point, halfway into the verse, I added just these little bells, and you can kind of hear bouncing in between the 2 ears. So it just sounds something like this. Nothing crazy, but when you hear it in the context, I feel like it adds a little bit. Maybe you guys tell me if it doesn't, maybe if I'm just thinking that it's too great. But yeah, this is what it sounds like once the bells come in.
Take your time, hurry up. The choice is yours, don't be late. Take a rest. As a friend, as an old memory. I love that part as well, the memory part. That is the most memorable part of the song without us even being involved. That was always the most memorable part, and I was excited to do that. And then Sean made us kind of embellish it a little bit more, make it a little bit more our own. So instead of just doing the straight memory, we got to wave ride it. That was fun.
Yeah. That was all Sean's idea. Shout out to you again, Sean. So let's break this down. So this is, I guess we would call this the chorus, right?
Yeah.
So I guess this is the chorus of the song. For the chords, these are completely different chords than what it was in the actual song. I don't even remember exactly how. I literally just, I took the melody, I think, of the memory and just tried to complete different chords to go under it that had nothing to do necessarily with the original song. So we go into it from the memory part, and then the bass line and the drums switch up a lot. So coming into it from the first verse, once we hit that memory part, that is when everything kind of changes. So you can hear it from the end of the verse here to where it really goes into something different.
As an old memory.
there's a few extra things, a few extra instruments that come in during this part. So I'll play the whole rhythm track now with all the drums and the bass. Added that little cymbal, that crash cymbal. So that's the rhythm section. Keeping those bells that we added in at the end, keep those, but just make it a different rhythm. So now with the bells, it comes in something like this. Then, just when you thought we were done with the bells, bring in more bells. These bells basically are just matching what the chords are. You'll hear it now when I play it all together. And when you hear the bells by himself, this is what they sound like.
I love the last layer of bells. It's so haunting. It's really like pulling the song together.
Again, I don't remember what the chord progression was in the original song, but we took this chord progression and we made it descending. So it's do, 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 do. I don't think that's what it was in the actual song.
No.
You tell us, I don't remember. The last thing instrumentally added there was, again, just to kind of thicken up the chord progression a little bit. So it's actually just single notes on a synth. This synth is called Dream Voice, which is pretty cool, I think. And it just kind of sounds like some oohs and ahs, just like a synth version. Then with the bells. Now with the other bells. Kind of floaty, right? Mm-hmm. Until you bring the bass in and the drums. The vocals for the chorus are basically the same way that it was layered for the verse. It's just a different rhythm and melody, obviously. This is the main vocals by itself, which is actually both of us. As no memory, yeah. Then you add in the vocal doubles, which you'll hear come in at the memory part. As no memory. So you can kind of hear it getting bigger and bigger already. And now you add in the harmony. The harmony itself sounds just like this. So when you add all of the vocals together, now it sounds very big and it sounds like this. As no memory, yeah. Let's do it one more time.
I don't even remember singing the high track.
I don't either. It's all a blur. The second verse is pretty much the same instrumentally as the first one. I realized I did forget to shout out one other thing that is in the verses, and that is the Dream Voice synth. It's just in there to kind of add a little flavor like this. So see if you can hear that in the second verse. It's very quiet. I've realized the more that we make songs, it's about doing just the right amount. You don't want to do too much. You don't want anything to overpower anything. So adding something like this, it's not like, oh, it's going to be a whole new melody and a whole new crazy thing. It's like, no, it's just going to take what you already have and just make it a little bigger. That's really all it is finding the right pieces to accent the main pieces of the song. One last thing I'll shout out that Sean did. At one point in the verses during my vocals, he threw like some kind of effect on it. I don't really even know what it was exactly. Maybe we'll get him to tell you, but it just takes the regular vocal and it makes it sound like as a friend. So I don't know what it is. It sounds like a delay and like maybe some kind of distortion or something, but it sounds cool. So now we're gonna talk about, I guess it's the bridge. We're calling it the bridge, but it's the I swear that I don't have a gun part of the song. And I swear that I don't have a gun. No, I don't. No, I don't. So again, we're trying to make this different. It would be really easy to just look up the chords and be like, oh, well, they did this chord, so let's just do this chord now. But we're trying to do something different. I kind of in my head just took the melody of the Don't Have a Gun part, and I'm like, what other chords would work under this? And then ended up putting it on a piano. This obviously is 2 tracks. There's the main chords here. And then there's kind of, I don't even want to call it a melody, just like a higher keyboard riff in the other ear, and that sounds like this. What did you think when I came to you with this piano part saying this is what the memory thing is going to be? Or the I don't have a gun part?
I really like the idea of it. The piano part really affected my delivery, but also Kurt's original part affected my delivery. Because if you listen to the way he sings, and I swear I don't have a gun, if you kind of picture it in your mind, it looks like someone is at the door saying these things. But he sounds like he's grinning, and he actually does have a gun behind his back. You know what I mean? So I wanted to approach it totally differently because there was a piano, and the piano is such a it sounds so solitary. So I wanted to sound kind of more desperate and vulnerable, like, please let me in. I, unlike Kurt, actually don't. I don't have.
Please believe me. One other little interesting piece of this that goes throughout this section of the song is that dream voice synth that I was talking about before. I put one note in at the very end of the last section that carries in through the entire section. It's kind of hard to pick out by itself. This is the last note of the memory part before going into the I don't have a gun part. And that just stays there while all the instruments come in. So you'll hear that, that's just a constant, it's almost a drone throughout the entire middle section right here. No matter what else happens, that's still there. Even going through the guitar solo, but we'll talk about that soon. So for the vocals, like we were saying before, it's very common to double vocals, do 2 tracks of the same thing just to make it sound bigger and thicker. So I'm gonna play this, and I'm gonna add the second track in the middle so you can hear the difference, and then you'll definitely hear me when I come in on the harmonies. So the vocals itself just kind of sound like this. Here's Sifa.
And I swear that I don't have a gun. No,
this is the double.
No, I don't.
So you can hear that, and then I come in on the other side.
And I swear that I don't have a gun. No, I don't. No, I don't.
So with everything all together, that's how we get the bridge sounding like this.
And I swear that I don't have a gun. No, I don't. No, I don't.
I almost forgot. So we do bring drums and bass in at the end there. It's not anything too crazy. The bass is really just 3 notes, but we just wanted to give it that real big, thick bass sound where it's like it's gonna move the speakers in your car. I love that kind of thing, so I wanted to add that into the song. So with the drums and the bass, it ends up being like this.
And I swear that I don't have a gun. No, I don't. No, I don't.
So the next piece of this song is the guitar solo. It's based instrumentally off what we were doing during the I don't have a gun part, which again was another conscious decision to move away from the Nirvana song, because in the original, the guitar solo was done over the instrumental from the verse, but we just had the guitar solo come in over the bridge instrumental, so that just also gives it a bit of a different vibe. First thing I want to shout out about this is that I used a completely different drum kit again, because the solo I knew that the solo had to have a different energy, especially because it was using the same instruments as the part right before it. I wanted it to sound very much different when the solo started, so I used a completely different drum kit in the production here. Now you add in the bass. The piano is going throughout this as well, but it's a little different. In the previous section, there was chords in the left ear and then a melody in the right ear. But for this part, I was like, there doesn't need to be a separate melody while there's also a guitar solo. It's a lot, it might clash. So kind of pulled that back a little bit and instead just made 2 different piano tracks of basically the same thing at a different octave. So the piano during this part, it starts out like this, just like the other part. And then add in the second one about now. So it's actually simpler on the keys right there, but it just kind of gives it a better, it gives it more room for the guitar solo basically. So the last part of the guitar solo section is surprisingly the guitar solo. Who would have thought that? For this, again, it's one of those things, you want it to be similar, but you don't want it to be the same. So in my head, I'm like, okay, the guitar solo of the original song is super simple. It's basically the melody of the song, like the main melody. So in my head, I'm like, okay, let me start it like that and then just add more throughout the solo as it goes on so it gets more different but still has that familiar feel. So I'm just gonna let the whole solo play out. So that's pretty much it. One other thing I do want to shout out. So I did add 2 separate guitar tracks to kind of highlight what's going on in the solo. So I'm just gonna solo those. This is another thing that's pretty subtle. You might not have even really noticed it if we didn't just pause to like actually explain this, but you'll hear this throughout the solo. So that happens, I think, once every 2 bars during the solo. It just... So if I play just the guitars by itself, it ends up being like this.
Wow, I didn't even notice that was ad-libbed.
So the next part is the build-up going after the solo into the final section of the song. So for all intents and purposes, this build-up after the guitar solo is the exact same thing as the intro. The only difference is that the drum beat gets a little more aggressive as it goes on. The guitar solo is almost like a crescendo, right? So after it gets super loud, you need to bring it back down a little bit. You know, it's all about having different dynamics in the song. There should be loud parts, there should be quiet parts. So we wanted to make this a quiet part that builds back into the big end of the song. So after the guitar solo kind of cuts down to the bare elements like it was in the beginning, listen for what the drum beat is doing here. The drum beat starts to get slowly faster and faster and faster, and it makes it feel like more of a build-up. Now bring it back up. The acoustic guitar again in the right ear. After the breakdown, build-up, whatever you want to call it, it goes right back into the memory part, which is almost exactly the same. The big difference is that the guitar is now playing throughout that. The guitar was introduced in the guitar solo, and now that it's been introduced to the song, I want it to be there because it just feels like it's getting bigger and bigger as the song goes on, right?
Yeah.
So now coming in from that build-up, which I'll play for you, you'll now hear the guitars also playing. The guitars by itself are really just straight up just power chords, just do 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 do, and it just sounds like this. So nothing crazy there. That's really the biggest difference. I'll play it in context so you can kind of hear how it adds to the drop when it drops back in. But it does the whole build up and then the distorted guitars, which you should be able to hear now if you really think of that. Everything else is the same. The bells, the vocals, the doo-doo. And now we go into the last section, which sounds like this. Going into the last section, it's almost exactly the same. The big difference here is that the drums and the bass are different. The I don't have a gun part, we're singing the same thing, our vocals are doing more or less the same thing. Everything else that was in there before is more or less the same. There's just a few tiny things added that really gave it just that extra kind of kick to the end. So we'll kind of break those down, and that's pretty much the song. In the first time that we did the I don't have a gun part, there were no drums.
Right.
It came in very quiet, like you and the piano basically. And then the drums slowly built into it. For this, we dropped into it right with drums and a different bass line too. Drums by itself kind of sounded like this. Very aggressive, crash cymbals on the beat. Very punk rock, you know. And the bass is way different here. So I think the bass, when it comes in with the drums, it just gives it like a whole different feel to it. Almost more of like a hip hop beat. So that's what this sounds like when the drums and the bass come in together. So that is the biggest difference between the original version of it. The only other big difference is that the guitar remains in the mix, because we first brought the guitar into the song during the guitar solo, and as you're building the song, you want it to keep getting bigger and bigger, right? So since we brought in the guitar during the solo, it felt right to keep the guitar going at the very end too. Like we were saying, for the memory part, it was the fast do 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 do. But again, you want it to keep switching up. So I didn't think it would be right to keep doing a fast part here, especially when the drums and the bass are doing more of a faster thing. So really tried to give the guitar more space here. Basically, it just comes in letting the chords ring out instead of hitting them a lot. And just like we doubled the vocals, these are also doubled. This is 2 guitar tracks doing the same thing. One in the left ear, one in the right ear. The very last part that's different was Sifa's idea, because you were like, this is good, but it sounds very similar to the beginning part.
Yeah.
And that's something that, again, we're trying to think of, how do we keep these parts the same part, but also clearly different. So Sifa was like, what if we just added a little extra drum, sprinkled a little hi-hat in there, right? Add this little piece to it just to give it more life. Just a little more bounce to it, you know? So with everything together, the instrumental for this section ends up coming to something like this. And that more or less is everything going on in this song. I'll show you the very end. I added the riser and that reverse cymbal to make it like one last buildup at the very end of the song. You'll hear all these pieces. We're about to come to the last bar. You can hear the rise. And that's it. And it ends on the do, 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 just like how it started, you know?
Yeah.
Everything just came full circle.
I like that. Just a nice established motif throughout the whole thing.
And that's pretty much it. Let me go ahead and play the whole last part with the vocals. At the end, every single instrument that we put throughout this song on and off is playing. So it is like the biggest, thickest part of the song. So I think it's cool to just hear it with the vocals so you can really see how it all comes together and ties in at the very end. And this is what everything sounds like in its final product. And that's it. That is how we made our cover of Come As You Are by Nirvana. We hope that you guys found this interesting, educational, whatever you wanted to get out of this video. We hope that you got it out of it. Definitely check out the original, the full version of the cover. It's on Spotify. It's on all that stuff. Put a link somewhere over here,
And
so you can listen to it on YouTube.
Share the song.
Like, comment, do all the things, you know what I mean? What else should we say? You're supposed to like, comment, subscribe. That really helps us out a lot. And if you watched it at this point in the video, then you clearly enjoy it. So definitely hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. If you like what we do here, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/sideafterdark, so you can support us. We can keep making more and more content like this, make more music, possibly more cover songs, who knows? But that's pretty much it. We appreciate you for taking the time to watch this with us. We hope you enjoyed it. We're Side After Dark, and we'll see you soon.